My name is Carla, and I'm 30 years old. For years, my parents never said it directly, but I always knew they saw me as the disappointment in the family. It started with small things, the way they compared me to my sister, the way they praised her in front of others, but stayed quiet when it came to me. If someone asked about her, they would smile and talk proudly. If someone asked about me, they would pause and then change the subject. My sister had the life they wanted, a stable job, a clear path, something they could easily explain to people. She fit their expectations perfectly. I didn't. I chose a different path, one they didn't understand, one they didn't respect, and over time, it became clear that no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough for them. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it didn't matter, that I would prove myself one day, that eventually, they would see me differently. But it didn't happen like that. The comments became more direct, the silence became more obvious, and slowly, it stopped feeling like a misunderstanding and started feeling intentional. Then came the night that made everything clear. It was my cousin's engagement party, a big event, full of relatives, friends, and people my parents cared about impressing. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Everyone was dressed well, smiling, talking like nothing was wrong. I remember standing there, not really part of any conversation, just observing. I had gotten used to that feeling. At some point, my mother walked up to the stage and picked up the microphone. No one thought much of it. She usually gave speeches at family events. She started normally, talking about family, about happiness, about how proud she was. Then she stopped. She looked around the room, and then directly at me. And in that moment, I knew something wasn't right, because the way she looked at me wasn't pride. It wasn't even neutral. It felt like a decision had already been made. She held that look for a second, and then she smiled. Not warmly, not proudly. It was the kind of smile that made it clear this wasn't going to be a normal speech. Then she said, as some daughters, no matter how much you try, just don't turn out right. For a moment, I didn't react. I wasn't even sure if I heard her correctly. But then I noticed the room. A few people laughed quietly. Others looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Some avoided looking at me altogether. And before I could process what just happened, my father spoke from his seat. We gave her everything, he said. Every opportunity. And somehow, she still became a disappointment. This time, there was no confusion. It was clear. They weren't speaking in general. They were talking about me. In front of everyone. I could feel the attention shift. Conversations stopped. People turned slightly in my direction, trying not to make it obvious. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked curious. And a few seemed entertained. I stayed where I was. I didn't move. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't expect it to happen like this. Not publicly. Not so directly. I glanced at my sister. She didn't say anything. She didn't look surprised either. If anything, she looked prepared. That's when it started to make sense. This wasn't something said in the moment. This was planned. Carefully. Deliberately. They wanted to say it here, in front of everyone who mattered to them. To define me. To reduce everything I was into one word. Disappointment. For a brief moment, I felt it. That familiar weight. The same feeling I'd carried for years. Just heavier now, because it wasn't private anymore. But then something shifted. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, because while they were standing there, confident in what they were saying, they had no idea what I had been doing with my life. They thought they understood me. They thought they had the full story. They didn't. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. It felt different now. Heavier. More focused. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to disappear from it. I set my glass down on the nearest table and started walking toward the stage. Slowly. Not to make a scene, or just enough for people to notice. At first, only a few people turned. Then more. By the time I reached the front, the room had gone quiet again. My mother saw me. For a second, her expression changed. It was subtle, but it was there. She didn't expect me to move. She expected me to stay where I was. I stepped up, reached for the microphone, and took it from her hand. She didn't resist. She just let it go. I turned toward the room. There were more people than I had realized. Faces I knew, faces I didn't, all watching, waiting. I didn't rush. I just took a breath and said, "You're right." There was a slight reaction in the room. Not loud, just enough to feel it. I continued, "I didn't turn out the way you wanted." I could feel my parents watching me now, closely, but that doesn't mean I turned out wrong. No one interrupted. No one spoke. "I chose a different path," I said. "One you didn't understand. And instead of asking, you decided what it meant." I paused for a moment, not to create tension, just to make sure I was saying exactly what I wanted. "For the last 3 years," I continued, "I haven't asked you for anything." I saw a few people shift. That wasn't what they expected to hear. "I've been working, building something on my own." Quietly. Didn't go into details yet. I didn't need to. Not yet. Because now, they were listening. Not judging. Not assuming. Actually listening. And I knew this was the moment everything started to change. There was no need to. By now, the room was completely still. No whispers. No movement. Just attention. I looked around for a moment, then continued. "While you were telling people I wasn't doing anything with my life, I was building something." I kept my voice steady. "I started working on my own. Small projects at first, then bigger ones. I learned everything myself, step by step. No one interrupted. No one looked away. And now," I said, "I run my own digital business. I work with clients you've never heard of, not because they're small, but because you never cared enough to ask." There was a shift in the room, not loud, but noticeable. People weren't looking at me the same way anymore. I continued, "Last month alone, I made more than I ever thought I would when I started." I didn't give a number. I didn't need to. The point was already clear. Then I turned slightly toward my parents. Not aggressively, just enough to include them in what I was saying. "You called me a disappointment," I said. "But the truth is, you never understood what I was trying to become." They didn't respond. They couldn't. "For years," I added, "I stayed quiet. I let you define me, because I thought I had to." I paused, "But I don't anymore." That was the first time I felt completely certain of what I was saying. Not emotional, not reactive, just clear. I handed the microphone back and stepped away from the stage. No one stopped me. No one said anything, but I could feel it. The difference. The way people looked at me now wasn't the same as before. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't something I had to question. That night didn't change who I was. It just made it visible. And after that, no one ever called me a disappointment again.